Stick around to find out which piece of artwork made the creator of Oddworld say this.
He watched Elum die slowly as Abe cried on top of him. It's just like, just thinking, if I look in Alf's eyes, I'm feeling like he's looking at something like that.
We get tons of fan art here at Oddworld, and we genuinely love to see it, from the drawings and the sketches to the paintings to the sculptures, the 3D renders, needlepoint craftwork, you name it, we've seen it. We genuinely love to see it. However, every now and then we get sent some artwork that blows the entire team away, and this is one such instance. From username Cardo Tacoma, we received an entire magazine's worth of concept art that stunned everybody, including Lorne and Sherry. So much so that it inspired me to have a sit down with Lorne to discuss their art, to discuss art in general, and along the way we also discuss Oddworld, and you may find some little tidbits about Oddworld lore in that discussion. So sit back, enjoy the artwork, and enjoy the discussion.
So here's what it's hard through time to see people representing Abe in a way that captures the essence of Abe without being, a Xerox copy of some of the other artists' work. And I don't mean that exactly literally, but at different times, people capture the essence of our characters in a unique way that's their own style. And to me, that's fan art has a lot of different dimensions of how you can appreciate things. Sometimes it's innocence with the youth and how they portray it. It's just kind of like, children's drawings, kind of wonderful, an entirely different spectrum. And then there's people that have their own sort of mastery and their own style. And then when they, this is one of the things I've loved, through the years with the Oddworld fan art, is when people of capability then get the character so much, and they themselves are capable of making characters that really express themselves, like the way really, great comic book artists and great animators know how to like pull more character out of the character, right? Studying those nuances of facial expression. And so that just, there's that captivation of the intent of what these characters were meant to be at their heart. And then when they're portrayed really sort of competently and skillfully, but in people's own other style, I love seeing that, because it's not what we would have done, and that's just because different personalities, right? So we're usually focused on a certain way of rendering. We're taking these other considerations. So the stylization of Oddworld, we really ourselves over time haven't had a lot of room experimenting with, outside of the more, sort of oversaturated but relatively realistically or increasingly realistically rendered, scenes and gameplay and cinematic scenes. So seeing this experimentation is it's kind of a joy. It's like, wow, yeah. And in this one, when we're looking at, we never had a shot, and this is what comes to it too, right? We never had a shot of Abe with the amulet floating, right? So there was never, on the amulet itself, there was never an anti-gravity effect, right? Like Abe is seeing right there. And then on the right, with the keeper, we never had the honeycomb energetic bees inside her sort of grasp. Like what I see there is like Shaolin, like that Yoda-like ability for sort of, controlling energy and life forms, having that influence over them. And looking in the facial expression, there's a weariness, and there's a wisdom, and there's a caution. Like there's secrets, and that's really what she was about and is about, and that all these things. What I like about it is it inspires back of like, oh yeah, of course the amulet should have anti-gravity, but we weren't thinking of the amulet as anti-gravity. We were having the sonic frequencies of the keepers in the catacomb, right? Yeah. And that in there, it was like a resonance chamber with anti-gravity capabilities. And it's like, it's kind of like a giant tuning fork to Earth's principles and properties. But it's like, to make images like this, it stimulates back to see people, exploring and making connections in the universe that existed. Like I said, the anti-gravity was in that catacomb and all of that history and all that knowledge, but there was no anti-gravity associated with the amulet, but the amulet came from the catacombs. So that's not a connection that was made. So when I see that, I feel like I'm reading a comic book of a version of a story I like. So then it's like when you become a fan of something, you're pursuing the other exposures of that IP, and you go, oh, so and so artist is doing a comic book on this character now. It's like, oh, Frank Miller, we're interested. But what happens with that is you're just looking for more evidence within the world of ideas and synergies and concepts. And so here, like, we see two portrayals that we didn't create, but they're made out of the chemistry. So it's kind of this feedback loop of like, oh, that's right. That should be happening like that. If you imagine the circumstance like that, why wouldn't that happen? And so it makes perfect sense to me. But anyway, a long riff on two great images there. This is just a kind of a great image of Abe, influencing the spirit of this creature. It's like probably one of the single best images that communicates that idea, that transference of consciousness. Yeah. And so, we were calling it possession, right? In lore, we'd never talked about it. We're referring to it as astracata, like gun kata or like gun fu. Astracata, like like a martial art of energetic projection and takeover, like a jujitsu of astral projection. And so Abe has found this. It's just an opportunity to talk about the story. I hope that's it. But that's how these images stimulate me. So it's like it makes me want to say more of what's going on there and what in the rest of the story. I hope to be able to unfold for us is that what's going on there is Abe, through his innocence connection to the creatures in a very empathetic and open heart and just deeply connected way. That strength of sort of pure heart and empathy enabled him to make contact on a different dimension, to have a different connection. He was then able to use this connection that he had learned naturally. Like he found this, that he would use that connection in ways that would help free his people. What he didn't know and what he doesn't know and what's coming is that is an old, superstitious, outlawed practice like witchcraft in England. So, these conditions are kind of deep in our histories, and then they carry taboos. What Abe doesn't know, he stepped in, is what he's done naturally to just sort of, for him, always just trying to, help the greater cause of let's not be, assholes to each other, right? Is that's how he discovered this. But later, that'll be used against him, like he's a dark shaman sorcerer. You see, and so that will be used in propaganda to start saying, do you realize what this Abe guy really is? Once they come to the point of acknowledging, that he exists. So they'll use that to brainwash the Mudakin and the general part and misinform the general larger populations of the cities as the sort of force of Abe and his followers is getting out of the third world, moving into the second world, and eventually aiming for the first world. And I'm using that in classic, economic, social strata sort of measurement, societal measurement of a civilization still today. But that's the point, right? It comes through this journey. And so one of the things that was great about him in this way, he's going to find that stigma will be used against him to make his own race of people in more, let's call it, civilized places, in industrialized places. That'll be used as a fear weapon. There's something in the style that where she has a good sense of light and the feeling of what's luminous versus, and using that to draw your attention to, there's a lot of nice little touches there, but it makes it feel like it is an illuminating image. Yeah, but look at that. She could be, colorist at Disney. little expressive swatches, of just themes and colors and experimentations. Like that's a pretty radical color scheme, right? And yet, it feels like a Pixar movie. Here, like look at his eye. The most important thing in that image is that eye, right? And your eye goes right to that red eye. I mean, for me, it does after grazing the picture very quickly, right? Goes right to that red eye. And then it's the expression. And then it tells you a lot about, that prick in the picture, right? Like, and then the one next to it is, so to me, she almost feels like an animator as well, because in the one next to it is more of an expression exercise. So she pays a lot of attention to, look at Abe, what's Abe's emotion? He's scared, right? He's worried. He's concerned, right? And that's now look at the Slig. He's more beady-eyed around it. Look at the Gluckin above him. He's more mad but angry in a furious way. So his eyes are, bulging and up and down. His pupils are expanded. And then the one on the left, he's conniving, and he's sinister, almost grinning. But you're not quite sure, So to me, it feels like I'm looking at partially, a comic book artist or a animator's, someone who works in animation, working out, who's familiar with how to get character expressions. And here's one of the things that's really hard is you will see, and I love looking at production design artwork across the world. When you look at a lot of characters, a lot of people make characters, but those characters they communicate like a cool design, but they don't necessarily communicate an emotion or a thinking. Like you don't be like, yeah, I don't like what that dude's thinking. When I look at that Gluckin right there, it's like, yeah, if he's your judge in your court, you look like you're screwed, right? And it's not just like, oh, that's a crazy looking monster. But you're like, yeah, but I want it to look like crazy looking smart monster. And then it'll go, oh, smart. Okay, I'll put a pencil behind her ear. It's like, yeah, no. When we look at his face, we should see what he's thinking. And then when I went to school, there was not many people that were illustrators and production designers that were focusing as much on that, and I think with computer animated movies and all the graphic novels and comic book emergence post Image Comics, launching and really sort of blowing the industry back as something major, comic books was a dying thing too. But with all of that, it made artists and painters, I think, as a few generations emerging, more cognizant of facial expression in the things that they're designing. And if you go back in the history of illustration, Frazetta did that really well, or but not a lot of people, illustration was often very stiff. But I think, animation changed illustration that way. So anyway, this just takes me through all that reminisce. Here, as character studies, these are golden. Like, these are also expressions that we never showed with Alf, really. But look at that. It's like Alf's heart was broken. That's what that looks like to me. He watched Elum die slowly as Abe cried on top of him. It's just like, just thinking, if I look in Alf's eyes, I'm feeling like he's looking at something like that. And we go, oh man, we don't want to see Abe on top of a slowly dying Elum. And you'd be like, right, but if you did, Alf might be looking like that when he did. So to Cardo, thank you for sharing this work, because it was a wonderful piece of inspiration. It's great seeing such artistic skills that you have, particularly around anatomy and expression and color and composition and context of ideas. Just really, really inspired to see your work, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
To reiterate what Lorne's just said there, thank you once again to Cardo Tacoma for sending us this amazing body of work. It genuinely was a pleasure to see the art, and also to get that time with Lorne to discuss art in general. Now, keep sending us your artwork. We do see it. Everybody on the team takes time to enjoy your hard work, regardless of your skill level. So you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Discord, anywhere you pretty much engage socially. Tag us, mention us, send it directly to us. We do genuinely see everything that comes our way. In the meantime, take care, stay odd. We'll see you soon.